Hello, we are back. We are doing our book club today, Be Holy, for I Am Holy book club. And we are reading Catherine Emmerich's Vision. And we are going to do Abraham today, which is on page 33 if you have the book. If not, you can just follow along. Let's get started. Abraham and his forefathers belonged to a very peculiar type of mighty race. They led a pastoral life. They were not really natives of DR in Chaldea, but they had removed there. They exercised special authority and jurisdiction. Here and there, they took possession of certain religions.
Regions.
They took possessions of certain regions, thank you, where good pasturage was found. They marked off the boundaries, erected an altar of stones, and the land thus enclosed became their property. Something happened to Abraham in his early childhood, similar to that which occurred to the child Moses, by which his nurse saved his life. It had been prophesied to the ruler of the country that a wonderful child would be born whose birth would be very fatal to his interests. The ruler took measures accordingly, on which account Abraham's mother concealed herself before his birth in the same cave in which Seth had been hidden by Eve. There Abraham was born, and there secretly reared by his nurse Maraha. She passed for a poor slave who worked in the wilderness. Her hut was near this cave, which was named after her, that she was. After her death, and in accordance with her own request, buried there by Abraham. Abraham was a remarkably large child. When on account of his unusual size, he was of an age to pass for a child born before the prophecy alluded to. His parents took him home, but his precocious wisdom exposed him to danger. So the nurse fled with him and again concealed him a long time in the same cave. Many children of his age were massacred at that time. Abraham tenderly loved Maraha, his nurse. In after years, in all his peregrinations, he took her and him on a camel. She also dwelt with him at Succoth. She died at the age of 100 years. Abraham hewed out a tomb for her in the white stone, which, like a hill, enclosed the cave in which he was born. The cave became a place of devotion, especially for mothers. Throughout the whole of this history, we discover a mysterious prefiguring of the early persecutions which Mary with the child Jesus had to endure. It was too in this same cave that they hid from Herod's soldiers when they sought the child. The father of Abraham received great graces from heaven and understood many mysteries. His race possessed the gift of discovering gold in the earth, and he fabricated out of it little idols similar to those that Rachel purloined from Laban. DR is a place in the north of Chaldea. I perceived in many parts of this region on mountains and plains, white flaming arising, as if the ground were on fire. I know not whether this fire was spontaneous or kindled by man. Abraham was a great astronomer. He understood the properties of things and the influence of the stars upon birth. He saw all kinds of things in the stars, but he turned all to God. He followed God in all things and served him alone. He imparted his knowledge to others in Chaldea, but he traced all back to God. I saw that in a vision he received from God the orders to depart from his country. God showed him another land, and Abraham next morning, without asking any questions, led forth all his people and departed. I afterwards saw him pitching his tent in a region of Palestine, which seemed to me to lie around the place where Nazareth subsequently stood. Abraham himself erected here an oblong altar of stone with a tent over it. Once, when kneeling before the altar, a light descended from heaven upon him. A light descended from heaven upon him. An angel, a messenger from God, appeared, and he said something to him, and presented to him a shining, transparent gift. The angel spoke with Abraham, and the latter received the mysterious blessing, the holy thing from heaven. He opened his garment and laid it upon his breast. I was told that this was a sacrament of the Old Testament. Abraham, as yet, knew not what it contained. It was hidden from him, as from us, and concealed the substance of the most holy sacrament. But it was given to him as a sacred thing, as a pledge of the promised prosperity. The angel was exactly of the same kind as the one that announced to the Blessed Virgin the conception of the Messiah. He was also as gentle and tranquil as Gabriel in the execution of his commission, not so hasty and rapid as I see other angels under similar circumstances. I think Abraham always carried the mysterious gift about with him. The angel spoke to him of Melchizedek, who was to celebrate before him the sacrifice which, after the coming of the Messiah, would be accomplished and which should be continued forever. 10.
Abraham then took from a casket 5 large bones, in which he laid upon the altar in the form of a cross. A light burned before it, and he offered sacrifice. The fire burned like a star, the center white and red, and rays red. I also saw Abraham with Sarah in Egypt. He went thither in obedience to a command from God, first on account of the famine, and secondly to take possession of a treasure which had been carried there by one of Sarah's relatives. The treasure consisted of triangular pieces of gold strung together to form a genealogical table of the children of Noah, and especially of Sem down to Abraham's own time. It had been taken into Egypt by a daughter of Sarah's maternal aunt, who had gone thither with a pastoral tribe, some of Job's lateral descendants, who afterward degenerated into a wild state. She had there hired herself as a servant. She had stolen that treasure, as later on Rachel did the gods of Laban. The genealogical table was made like the scales of a balance hanging on the cords. The latter consisted of small triangular pieces strung together, and from them depended single collateral strings. On the gold pieces were figures and letters denoting Noah's and especially Sem's descendants. When the cords were let down, the various pieces all lay together in the dish. I heard, but I have forgotten the number of shekels. So the sum is called, to which the whole amounted. This family register had fallen into the hands of Pharaoh and the priests. They made on it various reckonings connected with their own unending chronological calculations, but they never rightly understood it. When Pharaoh was visited by heavy afflictions, he consulted with his idolatrous priests and granted to Abraham all he demanded. Upon Abraham's return to Palestine, I saw Lot by him in a tent. Abraham was pointing all around with his hand In his bearing, there was something of a deportment of the three kings. He wore a long white woolen garment with sleeves, a plaited white girdle with tassels, and a sort of cowl hanging down the back. On his head was a small cap, and upon his breast a shield in the shape of a heart made of metal or precious stones. His beard was long. I have no words to say how kind and generous Abraham was. If he had anything that pleased another, especially if it were cattle, he offered it to him at once, for he was a declared enemy to envy and covetous. Lot's clothing was almost like that of Abraham, but he was not so tall nor so noble looking. He was indeed good, but at the same time a little covetous. Covetous. I often saw the servants of the two disputing, and I saw Lot separating from Abraham. But as he went, I saw him enveloped in fog. Over Abraham, I saw light. I saw him take down his tents and wander about. He built an altar of field stones and raised a tent over it. The people of that time were skillful in building out of rough stones, and the master of the servant put his hand to the work. The altar just mentioned was the region of Hebron, the subsequent dwelling place of Zacharias, the father of the Baptist. The region of which Lot what the region to which Lot was removed was very good, as was all this part of the country toward the Jordan. I saw the cities around Lot's dwelling place plundered, and Lot himself with all his goods and chattels carried off. I saw a fugitive bear the news to Abraham, who immediately invoked the aid of heaven. Then gathered his servants together, he surprised the enemy and freed his brother. The latter thanked him gratefully and was full of regret for having separated from him. The enemy and the warriors general, especially the giants, were not clothed like Abraham's followers. Their garments were narrower and shorter. Their dress was, in many pieces, covered with buttons, stars, and other ornaments. The giants were extraordinarily large people. They brutally and insolently carried off as they could lay their hands upon, but they were often obliged to yield their booty to others who plundered them in return. So that was interesting. It especially here, when in the beginning they talked about, so here they are traveling, and we watched the movie His Only Son, who,
Yes.
yeah, and Abraham was there, and we really got a feel for who he was. I did personally, because they do character studies and they put them together. And he did seem very tall, although I don't remember seeing him standing. He did seem very tall, and he was not afraid. He was extraordinarily brave. And of course, we didn't see him as a child there, but I can imagine he was a very secure child, because to be able to listen to your intuition properly, you have to have security and a root to grow. You can't grow properly if you're not rooted properly.
Yeah.
And I imagine he was. We never learned the name of Abraham's mother, but I imagine because he was from this royal lineage that they were very revered. So because he was from the house of David, and so remember, this is all before
Yes.
before that. So we are watching this play out before and after, like just like over in heaven there's no time. We're seeing these characters in just, you know, time, but there is linear time in America, in the world. So we have to remember that this is all 2,000 years or more, you know, about 2,500 years. I forget the time before, but it was around 2000, let's say. So so yeah, he was here his nursemaid died around the age of 100, and their nursemaids were like a part of their mother, so I imagine he had some grief, but he
Oh,
handled it,
yeah.
yeah, but he handled it like a man handles things.
Yes.
strong. But he did all the things for her tomb, and he did, like my son did when my mother died. I couldn't really like do all the planning. He did all that for me. I couldn't even go to the funeral home. Which is weird for me. I'm an extremely courageous person. I face things I can't even explain to you. Um, and I've always had a lot of courage. But when it came to my mother's funeral, I couldn't go. I just was so, and I couldn't believe it because I'm not like that. So when you're going through that, I relied on my son. And I always considered myself, because I was a single woman, I had to be like the man and the woman. I couldn't do that part at that point because it was so deep. And so for him to be going through that, and here he is, and he created this place that was especially devoted to mothers. And every mother knows that we have our trials, and every mother has a grief somewhere in her heart with something with her child growing up, or something that happened, or maybe the child was, died in some way. We have such griefs as mothers in many ways. Everything our children go through, it's like we're going through. It's like we're reliving over and over again our own childhood traumas through
Yes.
our children's. Yeah. So everything our children go through, it's like we relive our own traumas on top of theirs, and then we feel guilty. There's just so much for mothers. And that's why a mother's prayer, when we watch the near-death experiences, they talk about the mother's prayer coming up as a beam of light from earth, and the big ones are the mother's prayer. So here he created this beautiful place of devotion for his nursemaid, who was like a mother. So I just found this very touching here. And they don't talk about his mother, they only talk about the nursemaid, but I imagine he underwent that with his own mother. So here it is, the cave that Mary. We have to remember this place, wherever it was, there's Iraq, there's Middle East, wherever. This was a very small world that they lived in, and they lived where their ancestors lived over and over. And here's the cave where they hid from Herod's soldiers, the same cave that
Wow, that was so
Abraham,
cool.
yeah, the same cave that Abraham created as a tomb for the mother. So yeah, that's just the parallels and the repetition, how history repeats itself. So I just found that amazing. And then we learned here that DR is a place north of Chaldea. We didn't know what it was. We're like, what is
Yeah.
this DR? Is it a doctor? The wording
Yes.
was so awkward.
Yes, and also the way it's written, sometimes it's hard to read because the
Yeah,
second sentence was
made
like,
no sense.
it said, but they had removed there. What? They removed what there? That's why
Right.
sometimes it's hard for me. On top of that, I don't read
I
that
don't
because
think they had good
the
editors.
weird, yeah, the weird words. I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
the
guys, and
odd
my reading
wording.
isn't that great. I'm sorry,
No, stop. Your
but
reading
I'm
is just
trying.
no. Your reading is just fine. There's no, the editors, they did not, she, remember, she wrote this, and they probably didn't want to change much because they didn't want to
Yeah,
lose meaning, just like with the
that's
Bible.
what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with the Bible, the Protestants said, well, this doesn't make sense to us, so they changed wording. You can't do that. Martin Luther took words out, and it changed the whole meaning. Look at all these confused, Protestants. This is why when the priests copied it, they were very careful not to change words. And I think that's probably what went on here, that they didn't want to edit too much. So it makes sense. But, so it doesn't always make sense. But, hopefully we get the gist and we get the understanding in some osmosis way. So Abraham received these great graces, and he understood many mysteries. He remember, and then as we watched in the movie, he's dealing with Sarah, who is distraught. When you have an emotionally distraught woman, for men, it just is like, okay, here she goes again. She's off one another, whether it's hormonal, which monthly. She had a lot of problems conceiving. So in the movie, they really dramatized that part. And it was a little, it just didn't, it it seemed
In
like
the
it was a
movie, she
little
needed to be,
overdone.
yeah, and in the movie, she needed to be a little bit older. She was too young.
Yeah, she was too young, and even Arnie said, "Wow, she's hot for 90." I could not stop laughing. I laughed so hard when he said that. So, it's just they have to over dramatize things. So her thing about being unable to conceive. They over dramatized it, but here he had to deal with it. There are real people like that on the earth that many men have to deal with over
But
dramatized
that
that are
movie was,
mentally ill.
yeah, that movie was very good though, because it kind of showed us what they probably were going through. Because
It was,
in
it brought
those
them to light.
days, expecting a child and not getting one, and then God telling her through him and through an angel, whatever, that they were gonna have a child, and she wasn't
And
having it. She was just beside herself. So we could imagine her
she
going
felt
back and
left out.
forth, back and forth, back and forth. Yeah, and then when the whole Hagar thing happened,
Well,
yeah,
that didn't happen. She, in her mind, instead of listening to God's will, she
yes,
decided to intervene and tell her husband to get a man,
yes.
to get this her nursemaid, and then she blamed him.
And then
And
she
of
was
course, he
upset
didn't
that
have
he
to
did
do it.
it. Well, he
Yeah,
could have
he
not
didn't.
done it. He
But
could have not gone
nevertheless,
through with it. He could have said
nevertheless,
no.
nevertheless, she created her own hell in that.
Yeah, yeah.
We
You're
we
right.
all do. On this earth, we all create our own hell
You're right.
because we think the will of God is this, so we take this action. We have to slow down. This world today is so fast.
Yes.
Very few of us are listening to God's will. Holy habits. Do those holy habits and slow down. We're too fast in this world. So I just saw him as we were going through this reading. I just saw him as they're talking about all of this. The father of Abraham received great graces from heaven and understood many mysteries. His race possessed the gift of discovering gold in the earth. So God was giving him graces to help him because he had a mission for him. When God gives you graces in your life, whether it's financial or personality wise, he gives you, you have to understand some people, there are unstable people that are hormonal and crazy, and they get, that is the devil will use that. But some people are born with the graces of intelligence, stability, and focus. And this was Abraham. And when you watch that movie, you really sense his solidity. He was a very solid man. He was a very intuitive man. And that's why it surprises you that he did the Hagar. But again, he was pleasing his wife, who in the movie is perceived as a little crazy, to be quite honest, hormonal crazy and acting out. We all can act out at times. But when you are off balance and you just have to calm yourself down and not try to read the will of God and let it play out the way Abraham seemed to be trying to, like Saint Joseph, as we said. He had a stability, and part of that is moving slow, not making quick moves, and those holy habits of prayer every day. God's going to speak to you. You got to read the readings every day. You got to really focus and slow down. And that's what I really appreciate about the old days. They did not do things quickly. They had to take many days to travel.
Yes.
Things that take us a half an hour. We ride up to, wherever we're going. We're like, I'm doing this. I'm going here. And we're so busy blapping that we're not listening, So I really can appreciate that. And I imagined him as we did that. And then his visions. Her visions, Emmerich, she's taking this vision of him, God speaking to him. And when you hear, like, he's setting up an altar, he is kneeling he's kneeling before the altar, and a light descending upon heaven, and an angel, a messenger of God, appeared. And this would have not as much meaning to me had we not just seen that movie. And before we get to that, I should have talked up here. He understood the properties of things and the influence of the stars upon birth. We look at astrology, we have to be very careful with that. It's different for them. We can look at personalities, but we do not look at horoscopes for our future. And that came to me. If you're looking at horoscopes for personality wise, I see that a little differently. I don't give it too much weight, but there can be some truth in it, and that's fine. But other than that, we don't look at horoscopes as far as predicting future. So he saw all kinds of things in the stars, but he turned it all to God. You can look at that stuff, but like I wouldn't even look at those horoscopes, but if you're looking at personality, end it there, turn it all to God. He followed God in all things and served him alone. He imparted his knowledge to others in Chaldea, but he traced it all back to God. He was a leader, and a leader does those things. And then it goes into the vision of him and getting that altar set up and the angel appearing. And he's kneeling before him. What is that? That is the habit of holy prayer and those holy habits of prayer. And if anything you can say, Abraham was someone who took his gift and handed it back to God to direct him. So very important. Don't make sudden moves. Don't act on what you think God's will is. Let it play out in time. Don't push things. We often we're taught, let's make it happen. We're the movers and the shakers. No, God is the mover and the shaker. You just listen to his will. How do you do that? Prayer. All the holy habits, all of them, especially the sacrament. So that's what I thought of. And then here it talks about something like the Eucharist. And I found this so like, wow, like he didn't have the Eucharist because Christ wasn't even born, but God gave him a substance of the Holy Sacrament there before. He fortified him with it. He gave it to him. When you take the Eucharist and you say, if you take your book and you're reading those prayers after and you're like, this is in me, Lord, and help me do your will. Help me take your flesh within me and become like your flesh and let it go through my body and become like yours. I mean, that's what he gave him at that moment, because those holy habits. That was a way of saying he had such strong holy habits, and God fortified him with that sacrament before it even was born. So it was I thought that was so beautiful. And so he was gentle and tranquil. We have to calm ourselves. Prayer, reading the gospel, morning prayer, get yourself in the right place. And then as a Gabriel and the angels will come to you, they help us execute our commission, our mission on earth, not so hasty and rapid as I see the angels in other circumstances. Even the angels moved slowly, deliberately. We all need to slow down, calm down. This earth is moving so quickly, political. We have so much going on at once, and we just have to calm ourselves in our holy habits and fortify ourselves. So here the angel speaks to him. Abraham always carried the mysterious gift about with him. He carried that holy sacrament. We're not allowed to do that. But when we take it, we're supposed to emulate him.
We don't know if it was the Holy Sacrament. It could have been another gift.
Well,
but whatever it was,
she says up here,
the most
according to
holy
this,
sacrament. So that, I guess, yeah, you're right.
Up here,
You're right.
so he's holding that within. We're not allowed to do that. But when we take the Holy Sacrament, we're supposed to become the flesh of him. We're supposed to be representing him. As Jeanette always says, we are to be Christ to others. He was being Christ to others before there was Christ. He was being God. Not in the egotistical way as becoming gods like the Mormons and the Protestants, no, he's doing it. So here the angel speaks to him after all of his holy habits of the sacrament. And the angel spoke to him of Melchizedek. We know after Abraham, he's Abram, and then Abraham, Abram becomes Abraham. His name is changed. And then when we know the key events, then Melchizedek comes to bless him. So he's being told Melchizedek is on his way to bless you. He's the first priest we hear of in the Bible. And Melchizedek, who was to celebrate before him the sacrifice, which is the coming of the Messiah. All of this, they didn't know when this was happening. It could have been tomorrow. In their mind, we're doing this because the Messiah is coming. They're not thinking, oh, it's going to happen in 2,000 years. I'm going to be dead. They are thinking this is about to happen. This is about to happen. And they're preparing them for it. They're doing all this. This is all playing out over thousands of years. So he lays out this altar, he lays it out and he does all this. And so she sees um her visions, Catherine, her visions, she sees Abraham and Sarah in Egypt. We saw it in the movie. So we're lucky we get a little vision of it, and it gives us a sense, which is what we are so lucky we have these things. And supposedly he stole, one of Sarah's relatives stole these triangular pieces, these triangular pieces of gold strung together, um on a table, the children of Noah. Remember, Noah was way before Abraham and was his thing. So apparently he had some treasure. You know, to us, maybe the Ark of the Covenant, you know, maybe they're talking about the Ark of the Covenant, and Sarah's relatives stole it. So here they are going through this hostile land to go and find it. The daughter of Sarah's aunt who had gone, and some of Job's latter descendants, which supposedly they are all related. So here they are going through this land looking for these triangular pieces strung together. Maybe this is part of the Ark of the Covenant. We don't know. But she's seen this because God told them, make this gold, these angels. So maybe it was part of that. That's just my imagination. I'm projecting that. I don't know that. So, but it was part of the family register, had fallen into the hands of the pharaohs and priests because she stole it, Sarah's family. And here they are looking for it, going through this land, and 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 they are trying to find this. It's part of Noah and their it talks about the people that are to be born, that are to bring about the Messiah. So this is very important. They don't know why, but they know that this is part of the family, and they're going out and they're looking for it. They're going through a hostile land. And here they are trying to do their sacrifices, very similar to the movie that we saw. Um, and then here, they were saying how kind and generous he was, even though these hostile people are coming, like we saw the Gentile in there, and he was saving him from the wicked men, and he didn't appreciate it, you know, like kids. He seemed young in the movie, we don't know, but he didn't appreciate it. He's like, oh well, you this and you that, and there's jealousy, there's envy, there's all of these personality things he's dealing with at the same time. So here, here they're talking about, for whoever, wait, it say, I have no words how kind and generous. If he had anything that pleased another, especially if it were cattle, he offered it to him at once, for he was declared enemy by envy and covetousness. And here he was having to give to these people that were envious of him while he's trying to do this. Lot's clothing was almost like that of Abraham, but not so tall and noble looking. So here comes Lot, his nephew or uncle, whichever it is. I think it's his nephew, and he is always trying to get him out of trouble, and he's always so ungrateful, just like the Gentiles were to Abraham when he's trying to save them from that wicked race. They just didn't appreciate it, and Lot didn't appreciate it. So he'd have to constantly, and their servants even were disputing each other, and he'd have to constantly calm down the fires of all this craziness of everyone, and this jealousy and this envy about land and resources. Because remember, they were very poor. Even though he is part of the royal family, they're very poor, and Abraham has this land that God gave him to cultivate, and he's helping everyone, including his family, and everyone's ungrateful, and they're attacking him, and he's staying intuitive and focused on his holy habits to stay to God. I could just see this amazing man. He was just so amazing. So, so here it is that Lot is being carried off, and then Abraham is begging from heaven aid, and then he helps him. He surprised the enemy and freed his brother, which is his nephew or whatever. And then here Lot thanks him and is full of regret for having separated. He's saying, I'm sorry, I was so ungrateful. So I thought that was really interesting. Here he is once again saving Lot from himself, as we all have to be saved from ourselves, from our leaders, whoever they are, and God is our ultimate leader. And how do we save ourselves? Holy prayer, holy habits. And they talk about, and she talks about her vision in the way they were dressed. And Jeanette and I, we love fabrics, and we love costumes and all that. So I just imagine their little costumes here that they talk about, their little clothing, and that they were extraordinarily large people. I think that the Jews were tiny people and and Gentiles were taller. And so I just imagine that. What?
It says the story of Abraham's nephew Lot
nephew
is relatively simple and well known. So yeah, he was Abraham's nephew, Lot.
And he was always trying to get him out of trouble, and he was always ungrateful, and they separate and he'd save him again.
Yeah.
So
it says relatively simple and well known. Fortune going to Sodom, a city offering good economic opportunities. He is taken as a prisoner of war in a foreign assault against the city. His uncle Abraham rescues him and the entire city along with him. Yeah.
So her visions, they checked them out between the Bible, the historic things. So they checked all her visions out, and she's given us these little details, which helps us see it as a movie, just like we saw that movie. We're lucky to have movies. But this is sort of like back then when she wrote this, they didn't have movies. When is this written again? The 1800s? I forget, but long before movies. So, but when I saw here the giants were extraordinarily large people, they are brutally, and I can just see that just like in the movie, they were big Gentiles. Remember, Jewish people were small people. Maybe Abraham was tall because he's the leader, a tall Jewish man. There are tall Jewish men, but generally they're shorter people, you know, compared to a lot of Gentiles. And then she also talks about here, sounds like sort of like our Native Americans. So maybe they had those type of people. The extraordinary large were either like people like the Native Americans or the Gentiles, whoever. So he's coming across them and they're stealing the booty all the time, everything that they go and get. And so here he is at the end here, saving Lot. So I thought that was all interesting, and I'm glad we saw the movie because it's easier to get through that. And we're just laying our foundation, and we're finally past some of the things that we don't know, and we're getting a good foundation. So our next one is Melchizedek's sacrifice of bread and wine, and now we're really getting into territory. We understand a little bit where we are in the key events and where we are in the Bible timeline, because that helps me when I stay rooted in the Bible timeline of these stories. It helps me.
Anne Catherine Emmerich, she lived, she was born September 8, 1774, and she died February 9th, 1824.
Yeah, so the 1700s, 1800s, she's writing this. These visions are happening. Yeah, because she had visions since the time she was a little girl, she said. She just didn't understand them, and she kept pushing them out of her mind. You know?
That is how the book starts. And I sent you a little link on her and her book, and it says you know, what were the visions, when was Anne Catherine Emmerich canonized, and it says October 3 of 2004, Pope John Paul II beatified Anne Catherine Emmerich. She was beatified solely this happened to her solely on her own personal sanctity and virtue. Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich was born into a large and poor family. So the basis of her own personal sanctity and virtue.
She was beatified.
I don't know why I can never pronounce
it. It's okay. I just wanted the people to know what you're saying. Beatified.
One of these days I'll say it right, guys.
But they looked at all of her writings.
Yes,
and they said these were historically correct. There's a couple of things like the unicorn thing, I think were just part of her visions that, you know, were a little bit.
It could have been another animal. She just saw it like that. You know, it could have been a different animal. She just saw it that way, and that's what she thought of, you know.
But I'm excited now that we're in Abraham because of being rooted now. Like they looked at everything in historical accuracy, the Tower of Babylon, I found exciting because we knew a little bit about it. She gave us a little more. So I'm excited that we got a little bit of Abraham, and I'm glad we saw that movie because she didn't do as much in Abraham as I would have liked. But guess what? Having seen that movie, it's like God gave us this insight. It was just great.
Yay!
Yeah. And now here
Yay!
we are. She also talked about the sacrament. And now here we are. Melchizedek is giving us the Eucharist in the bread and wine for the next time. So this is just so fun in the Bible timeline and the key events. I'm finding this, Jeanette's been studying the Bible longer than me. I started maybe 10 and 15 years ago with the Jeff Cavins.
You started way before me.
Well, yeah, but Jeanette, I do big picture. I'm not as good with details. Like you read every day the readings. You did that for several years, and you would go deeper into the story. You know the characters more personally than I do. I don't remember a lot of the characters and all. So I learn in a big picture way. You learn in more details. So that's what's great about God putting us together, because I'll see the big picture and then I'll ask you, well, Jeanette, who is this and what? And then you explain to me, like, little things that help me put in perspective, because learning the Bible is learning our family story, guys. And the more we know where the like, because you and I will remember our history, and we'll remember birthdays, we'll remember family vacations, whatever it is that root us in the time, help us to put things in perspective. The same goes for the Bible. This is our personal story, guys. This is our story of God coming on earth. And before he came, the ancestors that would become him, then we become adopted children of his. So this all helps us put that in perspective. That's why the 70 key events I'm really trying to focus on. And this is helping me. I asked God, can you help me? Because my memory, I was a nurse, and I can't do my nursing anymore because I was losing my details and losing my, those little things that you have to stay very focused when you're a nurse, and because you have people's lives in your hand. So that that makes it harder for me. But I'm asking God to help me. And what does he do? He brings my Jeanette all the time. My Jeanette, she always gets me. She gets me involved in something. I'm like, I don't want to. I'm so overwhelmed. I'm very overwhelmed by simple, easy life. That's why, my habits I have to do every day. And that's why I'm building my holy habits. But this is really helping me root. And I hope it's helping you. And I'm putting the key events. I'm going to put all of them. I only put 9 so far, but I'm going to try to get all of them put in there.
Remember, habit, repetition, and pattern.
Yes. Let's work on our holy habits.
To have fortitude, you need those.
Yes, to have fortitude. So look, here we are. We're 4% red. I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but
it's a big book, guys. It's a very big book. 780 pages.
We're going through the big Bible. So when we do this slowly together, we're rooting ourselves in that timeline, and we're gonna remember it. And the reason why we want to remember it is because the more we understand, the more insights God will give us. The more we build on our understanding, the more God's going to give us. The more we build on our habits, God's going to give us more graces.
Yes. So next time, hopefully tomorrow, if all goes well, we will read Melchizedek's sacrifice of bread and wine, which is going to be very interesting.
So let's go. We will see you guys tomorrow.
Yes, we'll see you tomorrow, God willing.
Bye.
Bye-bye.